Goati te hopa hanu, Duae hoekte di guma, Wagatina gopishtaya, Tatse wich, Umatstui wich, Guma, Guheme, Hashcheme, Gume, Hoetuiche Xtru, Duae. Thank you, everybody. That was just, a quick blessing to wish everyone and welcome everyone here today. And, during this difficult time, that we all are safe and remain healthy, throughout and have long, blessed lives. So again, thank you very much for your time and having me here. And Isabel was kind enough to invite me here to really just give you a little bit of information about myself. And at first I was like, oh my goodness, I'm used to actually providing a lot of workshops on soil health, soil fertility, how do you actually take soil samples and process them and interpret them. So it was a very interesting turn when she asked me to actually just talk about my soil story. And so what I'd like to share with you today is a couple of different aspects. One, what is the driving force for me in my path? And then what do I actually do, to really advocate and provide soil knowledge to individuals? And so I'll start with this notion that, I'm from Laguna Pueblo, and Pueblos in large, are agrarian societies where family and community health are first, rather than the individual. And culture and our traditions, they really are from our ancestors and carries on through us in our beliefs and our actions today. So we're very much in active communities. And I actually was a military brat, so I didn't grow up back home like many of my, fellow community members. But what I did find as an adult was I found my way back home. But I think really while I was away, I had the opportunity to travel with my folks and also just really learn about different people and cultures. And so that was a very great experience. And also, I felt that my parents, because they were both in the military, they gave up a lot of sacrifices in that. And I think probably the only thing I didn't really like at that time was traveling, because, I met a lot of friends and I missed family members and doings back home, but it did give me an edge too, which I'll explain a little bit later. But while I was away, I was able to have a really strong connection to the land and my home and my community through my family. And my family is so important to me because they really instilled in me the Pueblo core values. And they taught this to me throughout all of my life. And a lot of those, values I still carry on today. Some of them are giving and giving love. And that's, giving from your heart and not expecting anything back, and loving and respecting one another, respecting your home, the land, and being really compassionate for whatever it is that you're doing or giving, to others. And then we have faith and spirituality, which plays a very important and active role in Indigenous communities. And then also, personally, there is understanding, having that understanding and balance to really think about, things happen for a reason. They don't just happen because, or because you feel something is going bad or wrong. There's always a reason why things happen, and that's having that understanding. And then also, having empathy too, having that passion and that drive and caring for one another and caring for the plants and animals and the land. That's all encompassed in Pueblo core values. And so that's just my drive, I think, through life, going through college, having military family and traveling, and then also in my professional life. So I'm really blessed to have these values with me that my family taught me. And my path, I think was like already laid out for me when I was small. My dad was stationed in Germany. And so when my mom and me came back, finally, I was probably like, maybe about couple years old. And I had my first interaction with mud. I fell in the mud. And after that, I didn't want to put my feet on the ground. So that was, my aunties tease me about that all the time and tell me, now look what you do, you're playing in the dirt. But it kind of started from there. And then growing up, like I said, in the military with my family and moving around, I didn't like that as much. But what I did find that it later prepared me for traveling around and seeing and experiencing different people and cultures, and then most importantly, agriculture. Especially here in New Mexico, it's we're very large geographically as a state, and so I was able to travel around and experience the different agriculture in different parts of the state. And not only that, but then also what it means and learning about new customs and practices, even within just our state. You think about, wow, she went to Italy, but coming back here, gosh, you learn so much from so many different people just within our state. And so I just wanted to bring that to you on how diverse and beautiful our state is. And so another pathway that kind of led me to soils, and it didn't click right away. I actually took an aptitude test in high school and it came back as soil science. And I was like, well, what is this? It didn't click for me right then and there. But again, my path was being laid out for me, which is really interesting. And then in college is where I really found my passion for soil science, and sitting in, with a soil teacher and mentor. He really brought me out of my shell, and just taking different courses and classes and learning about soils. And that's what also really sparked my interest. It was already kind of there laying out for me. And then all of a sudden, hey, it hit. Some aha moments for me were when I actually took a course and we went out to Las Cruces and we visit some sand dunes hidden in the Dripping Springs area. And taking a look at these sand dunes and learning, about the parent materials and soil erosion. And we found out that the particles, some of those ones actually came all the way from Mexico. And they traveled as far as, Las Cruces in New Mexico. So it was very, like I said, like a very aha moment for me, because not only is that interesting in how those soils were made, but then also, hey, there's some big erosion factors going on here, due to climate changes, due to practices, that others are working on or not working on. And so that was one of the things that kind of led me to, hey, let's really work on improving our soils throughout the state and the world, really. And so another, I think, big aha moment too for me was actually getting into my profession in tribal outreach and working directly with the farmers and ranchers. These are individuals that I wanted to work with and collaborate with, and also learn from. There's farmers and ranchers who have their own way of doing things, who have practices and incorporate that into their daily operations. And that was very, very, very good for me to engage with and learn about, and then also, learn from my own people. And at that time, it gave me that purpose and that sense of place to say, okay, I have this knowledge that I got from, school, and how can I share this? And then also learn about the different practices and cultures. And so that was very helpful to me in my path, in my professional path. And I think also back to, just listening to the stories from my grandparents, my aunts and my uncles, and how inspiring those stories were too. I mean, we talk about, the soil stories, and I think where my story really begins is with my family. Both my grandparents were in agriculture. My grandfather on my mother's side, he provided and worked in the fields. He also grew fruit trees, apples and peaches and apricots and grapes. And my grandfather on my dad's side was actually a rancher. He helped his family really just coordinate the sheep, and then he went into his own production in cattle. And it was very interesting just really understanding what they did every day, because they were my first teachers. And my grandfather on my mom's side, what he used to do was practicing a lot of water conservation. So, separating out the different sections of the plants, kind of almost making waffle gardens. That was one of the practices that they did. They didn't use any pesticides. So a lot of it was already organic farming before it was called organic farming. and And then with my grandfather, who was a rancher, he was practicing rotational grazing, and they had several pastures for their winter and summer pastures. And they recognized the importance of letting the land rest, and also not allowing the cattle to compact the ground as much. And so those were teachings that, they were showing me, and that they practice quite often. And I remember my grandpa always saying, that if you take care of your animals and your gardens, in turn, they're going to take care of you. And the animals and the plants are like people. They have their own faces and their own ways of behaving. And it was very interesting because my grandmother recalls him being able to pick out his cattle individually to say, oh, this calf belongs to that mama, not that other, cow there. And so it just showed the dedication too that they had to their agricultural operations. And that's what was so inspiring to me. And that's what I wanted to learn in turn as well. And also my family and the elders would always say, go out and learn as much as you can, and then bring it back to the community. And because of, community is such an important aspect in our lives. We share so many things with each other, and that's what I wanted to do. And I think that was a really good, step in my heart as to where I wanted to go with my education and my career and my passion for helping others. And so I also wanted to share with you some of the spiritual side of things that I learned as I was going through my career. And I'm in a very unique position to where I'm able to share knowledge in my tribal outreach roles, but also learn from others. And so I have a lot of collaborations with different communities and producers. And I get a lot of really great insights that I try to carry on each time I learn something new into my actions and into my job. And so I'm going to share a couple of those examples with you. One of them, I remember going around and getting soil testing, and actually one of the producers said, hey, I would really like it if we pray before we take the soil sample, which, at the time I wasn't taking, I was taking numerous soil samples and going out with the different producers. And this one producer said, can we pray, because we are taking the soil from the land, and we are going to get it analyzed, but it's a living and dynamic life force. And I was like, of course we can. So ever since then, every time I do take a sample with a producer, we pray just real quickly over it to help give it many blessings for the producer, and then also just in general for the land. And another example I want to share with you is my grandmother told me one time, if you don't have cornmeal to pray with, use the earth, because it has life, just like cornmeal. And so whenever there is times that, and I, in my culture, we play with the cornmeal. If I don't always have it, then soil, it's always there. It's that life force that we use. And so that has, been in, and I carry that as well with me. Another time is actually giving a presentation on soil health principles. And we were talking with the farmer, and he said, you know what? I was always taught to clean our fields, because if you didn't, you were just considered a lazy farmer. But he said, now I know it's more beneficial to leave most of the weeds in the field for ground cover, especially if they don't have, funds to get ground cover seed for their farms. And if they have to use what they have, that's the weeds there. So that was, very, that was very good to hear that some of the presentation efforts that we try to talk about, they're utilizing. And another example too, that I learned from another colleague of mine, was that agriculture is just not cultivating livestock and the land, but also it includes, foraging and hunting and making the sacrifices that you do to tend to the field, to tend to the animals, to tend to the forest. And then also partaking in those ceremonies and praying. And that, was very insightful, because a lot of times, as humans, sometimes we just take, we don't often step back and say, we need to give back, we need to take time to appreciate what we have, or, we're just trying to rush and get to that next step. And we just need to take time to take a step back and appreciate those things. And oops. So that was one thing I wanted to share with you, was the impactful spiritual side of things that I learned from others in my different roles. And as a tribal outreach specialist, I always like to share first with the producers or anybody that I'm sharing with, that there is much going on below our feet, even though we don't see it right away. And we only notice it when we have problems, when we see plants drying out or dying, when we see erosion happening, in the ditches or along our fields, or if there's not enough grass for livestock to graze upon. We only tend to focus on what we see afterwards. And so one of my questions to, I think, the group tonight is, what if our actions and best practices started before we see the end problem? That, and that is very, I think, true for New Mexico, because, we have very dry conditions here. We have limited water resources, and also, resources for the farmers and ranchers themselves. What kind of actions can we do to prevent seeing those end problems before it really gets too late? And so health, I think in general, when we think of that, it's not just improving what's already ailing us or what we kind of think of, but again, going back to, what's healthy now and how can we maintain that health? And so, and I pose this, to all the producers out there. There are so many good producers who are already doing the right things. And how can we maintain that? And then also for me in my professional positions, it's for me, my job to support all the good producers who are already doing really good things. And so, I try to really carry that out through my my positions and that understanding of producers and what they, bring to the table, and how can we collaborate and make things better. And so I think before I ramble on too much more, I kind of want to leave everyone with this good thought, giving from your loving heart with what you can, that should be plenty. And so with all of my heart, I really wish you all lots of blessings. And if there's anything that, I can do to promote soil health, or, even if in general it's learning about small agricultural business, or how your natural resources can play a part into your operations, or learning more about federal resources that you could use as individuals, I would be happy to be that connector for you. And in my role at the Indian Resources Development, not only are we providing resources, educational and technical assistance to tribal members, but we also focus on youth as well. And so if you feel that there's opportunities for my program to help with youth development or college and career readiness, that's something that I also do in my current position. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Isabel and Rob, if they'd like to hear anything else from me, or maybe if I'm just rambling too much here. But it's very nice to interact with everybody, and I hope you guys have some questions or even start the conversation on, what can we do to maintain the health of your soils, of your animals, of your operations. So thank you so much for your time, everyone. I really appreciate that, and I'll turn it over to these guys. Thank you.
So Charlene, that was so inspiring and special and so worth everyone's attention and time, and we so thank you for sharing, your experience, but your values from your pueblo and your people, and for sharing your spiritual attention to the soil and to life and the life force that is all around us. So anyway, we're very grateful you shared so much, and we really appreciate it. And I know there's some questions coming in, and so first of all, there's a hand up for Matthew Denenclaw has a question. I'd like to invite you, Matthew, to unmute and ask your question.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you, Charlene, for your valuable time and joining the group today. And of course, thank you to everybody for circling up. This is really neat to see. And I know I haven't been a part of the soil stories it's been a minute anyway. But yeah, Charlene, remind me a little more about your organization as far as the 101, like your service area and kind of who y'all have on staff. I'm pretty sure I've been told a time before. Before, but I've let it slip, unfortunately.
No problem. Thank you so much, Matthew, for your question about my service area and the program that I'm working with now. I am with New Mexico State University, the Indian Resources Development, and we have a statewide mission, which is to provide professional development and opportunities to Native American students in New Mexico, as well as working with tribal communities and really working to increase their skills and knowledge to build their technical and managerial expertise. And so, it's all about self-sustaining and creating those pathways for students. And that's what I do in my current position now. In my former position with some tribal colleges here in the state, and as an extension agent, we provided workshops and trainings to farmers and ranchers. We had youth programming. So we had a research program and then a garden program, and also connecting individuals with resources from USDA. So that was learning about, different like NRCS programs, like EQIP, for example, Service Agency, learning about their loans and operations for both youth and adults. And also, right now, I'm actually connecting a lot of higher education institutions, high schools, and tribal entities with each other, so that way they can build their capacities to have internships, for example, at their communities, or to mentor students within their communities as well. Yes, thank you, Matthew.
No, thank you. I'll be sure to get your email, and we'll send you an invite to our IEC Southwest Summit here from DESBA puts on.
Thank you. I look forward to that. I also put my email in the chat in case anybody's interested in any of the services that we provide. And also, if anybody's heard of the Flower Hill Institute, I did a couple presentations through their group recently on soil health principles, and it was very inspiring because the ladies after me were the inspiring piece. They actually were working on different farms or at larger scales for soil composting, whether for a small garden or doing some experiments on the range programs as well. So that was the inspiring part, but I do provide some presentations as well.
That's fantastic, Charlene, and thank you, Matthew, for your question. And Andrew and Katie Stone, I wanted to invite you to share your comment in person.
My comment is that today it was a blessing. My daughter, who's 20 years old, likes to walk around the little farm, and she looked up in the tree and said, "That's weird." And she grabbed her mama, Katie, and it was a swarm. So we were blessed with a swarm arriving on our elm tree today. And so they're busy trying to get that. The other thing I wanted to say was when I was a young man up in Rio Arriba, I would go by Okeawenge and I'd see the cornfield, and it was really weedy with the corn. And I'm thinking, is that guy lazy or what? And then I realized, no, he was feeding the soil and allowing the moisture to stay by having those weeds. And if you don't let them seed, they really are a benefit. And I think it's about your mindset towards the world, seen and unseen, I think. Thank you, Charlene. That was very awesome.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for sharing your blessing today and that great story of the cornfield in Okewinge. And it's very I think inspiring to see different practices from different communities in different places. And it just, like you said, it goes to show you that we're all different, but we all have the same goal in mind. We just do it in different ways.
Fantastic. Another comment, I wanted to invite Mark Kopecki to unmute and give a comment if you'd like to.
Thank you very much. Charlene, thank you for that nice presentation. I also really enjoyed it. I found it very inspiring, and I'm glad to hear that you're an advocate also for soil health. And I'd be interested in talking with you some more to see if there are some ways that we can collaborate on some of the projects that we're trying to advance too. And just really enjoy.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I would be happy to meet with you further to learn more about what your programs are offering. And if anybody's interested, in learning more about connecting with the communities as well, that's something that, I can speak with you about, or, how you can connect with those communities as well. And it's all about collaboration.
Absolutely. Collaboration is so critical, and your an illustration of it in the way you work and operate. So I wanted to invite Brian Naughton to ask the question that you posed in the chat in your if you were able to unmute.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you, Charlene. That was really appreciate that perspective that you brought. I wasn't sure what to expect, and that was really wonderful. You mentioned that you see a lot of producers, I think you said, doing the right thing, but, caring for the soil already, or people that are moving more in that direction. And is there a way to learn about who those producers are and how to support them? Maybe I'm saying that from a consumer perspective. And then similarly, what are some ways to find out about the practices, sort of diverse practices that are being used successfully around the state? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for your question. And certainly, I think to address your question about, how do we learn about those producers who do have good practices? And I think through networking, certainly to what the New Mexico Healthy Soils group is working on, is getting those connections with those producers. And certainly the soil stories, I think, is a big part of that. Another way, I think, to kind of connect groups together is probably coming in like a working group, or even just actually learning about different agriculture throughout the state. And in that sense, I mean, maybe there's chances for, and we've all kind of heard about this, maybe like agritourism, where there's a chance to even do exchanges, between different parts of the state. So the southern, region producers could probably come up and share with central and northern producers. And it's really, I think, important to share those aspects, because, there are more commercial farmers in kind of like the southern eastern part of the state, and versus, centrally, there's smaller production systems up here. And then in the northern, you have, smaller backyard garden systems. And so I think sharing with each other and learning, the differences and similarities and what we are all experiencing together is a great way to network and share with each other. Especially in times like these, where, we're always experiencing drought. And right now with the pandemic, we're also experiencing, shortages of like labor, or access to some of the, whether it's like federal funds, or access to equipment for smaller producers. They might have not been able to get as much during this last year. And so I think opening up and sharing on a platform like that, for an exchange, or inviting that thought process of like agritourism, that might be a way to really open up what everybody is doing, and then also share with each other too. It's just a thought. But feel free, anybody else, to share your thoughts on this, to Brian's question, and what you think that could help out. And his question was, how can we find those producers, and what are some ways to learn more about those practices? What do you guys think?
Eduardo Varela made a comment in the chat. I just want you to invite you to do it in person, if you could unmute, if you don't mind. Hi, Eduardo.
Hello. Did you get that?
So you were suggesting shopping at the co-op is a good opportunity and idea for supporting collaboration, which is a great idea. And I just wanted to invite you to, if you want to share anything more about that excellent point you made.
I was thinking about it today. You can also do some volunteer work there if you're a member for a small annual fee. Also, I received information in regards to this Zoom program from the co-op. So, they're doing their part, reaching out. There's obviously other extensions organizations that are moving this forward.
That's fantastic, Eduardo. And I know some of the volume might have been challenging somehow for everyone, but I mean, you said you can become a member of the co-ops, you can volunteer, and other opportunities for learning and participating in the movement. Charlene, did you have a comment about Eduardo's emphasis on the co-ops?
I think that's an excellent idea, Eduardo. There's I think growing interest in actually what co-ops do and how they, can interact with each other and then also benefit as co-ops too. So that might be another interesting aspect to bring up, is not only how to be involved, but what kind of benefits can you get from that? And that is a really good point there. So thank you so much for that. And I'd like to invite anybody else who has ideas on Brian's question. How can we learn about those producers and how can we share amongst each other? Oh yes, I think Isabel has her hand raised.
Yeah, and she has a good resource in the chat for everybody. Go ahead, Isabel.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat, a link to Regeneration International, which is a really good group to know. And they are putting together actually an international map of farms and ranches that are regenerative or striving to be. And we've actually thought about doing something similar for New Mexico. And I'm curious if the group thinks that would be a good idea, and sort of a regenerative resource guide, so that indeed eaters can find growers that conform to our values.
Thank you, Isabel. I actually did see a farm map for New Mexico, and I have to research that site again. It was very interesting. I did take a look at that site to see where the different farmers were, and then they had them categorized for different operations. And it was just really cool to see, some of the farms that I knew and working in some of my positions. So I think Tesuque Farms was on there. You had Don Bustos Farms in northern New Mexico, I think on that map as well, and also some urban farmers too. So I think that was a really cool map aspect. But I'll have to get back in touch with you, Isabel, to research that map farm. But thank you, that was a really good point as well. And does anybody else have any questions or comments or anything they'd like to share? I'm certainly interested in learning from you guys. Like I said, I'm always learning. And so, are there any practices that you guys like to share with the rest of the group on what you do in your own operations?
Go ahead, Ann. Ann popped up on the screen. Do you have a comment you'd like to make, Ann?
Yes, hi, this is Ann. First of all, I wanted to thank you so much. What a lovely presentation. I really enjoyed the what you talked about in terms of your awareness of, farming and nature and the animals. But what I was wondering is, it seemed, I'm new to New Mexico reasonably, and the CSA, so the community, what are they called? The CSAs, I can't remember what they stand for right now. But that seems to be a good way to get the community, aware and involved in eating local food. I think it's community-sponsored agriculture is what it is. Yeah. So are you familiar with a lot of that? And what do you think about, expanding, access to food in that way?
Oh, I think it's great, especially since, there's a lot of rural communities that kind of have to rely on each other and their neighbors. I see that growing quite a bit, and I know the nonprofit group MoGrow helps develop some of those CSAs. For example, when I was located in Santa Fe, they had a number of CSA groups throughout Santa Fe, and they were able to actually set up sites where they could deliver and provide access to fresh, healthy foods to those CSA groups, and then also, in turn, work with those farmers and ranchers and help them market their products and get them delivered throughout the state. So everything, kind of stays locally within, those regions of the CSA. So I'm very supportive of those. I think that's an excellent point as well. And I'm actually making notes on all of your comments. So thank you for that, Anne. I really appreciate that. And that is a perfect suggestion too.
And I just want to point out that Mark said that CSAs stand for Community Supported Agriculture. And just like we've been talking about, and it's so important in our state and all around, because, we are exporting 95% of our food we produce and importing, about 95%. So, we need to support the agriculture locally, and there's all kinds of great reasons for that. And I want to acknowledge that Isabel had a comment she could make.
Thank you so much, Charlene. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I want to comment on something you mentioned, that your grandparents already did certain soil health, or one could say regenerative practices, and there has been a very justified criticism, of the regenerative movement and of the movements that upon those shoulders that we rest, like the organic movement or agroecology, however the terms are, that we don't, that they're mostly led by white people, and that we don't acknowledge the indigenous roots of many of those practices that we now sort of promote as new and original, right? And I really want to acknowledge that, and I appreciate very much that that you shared those two examples, and you might have more more ideas about that you could share. And I just do think it's so important, especially in New Mexico, where we do have these really rich traditions to do right by those, and to honor those relationships and to work together. I think that's a really wonderful invitation from you to work together towards a better world, and towards honoring all our relations, like the soil, the life in it, the plants and the animals, and each other. So that is my comment, and I thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Isabel. This was great. I'm really glad to hear, from different community members and your questions and comments and your perspectives on things as well. And I think that's, just sharing with each other is so helpful in any processes that we're going towards. And so just very nice. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Truly, we're the lucky ones to hear from you, and again, your values and all that you put into what you do is invaluable. I wanted to give you, Charlene, a chance to make any closing comment, maybe a closing ceremonial comment for this wonderful discussion.
Thank you so much again, and I'll say this in English, and thank you all again for your time. I know you're probably wanting, getting ready for dinner or something, and to spend your time with me. I'm very honored. And in closing, I just want to wish you many blessings in all that you are doing, as good producers and as learners and speakers for your own communities, your own families, and your own operations, and that you are blessed 10 times fold for all that you guys are doing. And thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it.